Going to do that for us. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. And we're going to try and get it out on the web sometime this month. I have some other videos, and I have an audio from Don Marty, way back. I'll try to get that on there sometime. It was on Linux security. And I'll pass this around.
That was the one we did at the University of Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, well, I'll just give the floor to Collin.
Okay. My presentation tonight is going to be on Xen. We have basically 4 people that are going to be doing presentations. We have Robert's going to be covering the KVM virtualization that's sort of coming of age right now, and Nate's going to be covering Solaris zones. Is that it?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
They have a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
They have containers, zones, and one other.
Yeah, they bought one.
Another one?
I don't know when, but that article I sent out was the third one on there. Was the one that they had.
Oh.
They purchased.
And John's going to be covering VMware, and then me with Xen, and I'm the only one available tonight, so I get to have the entire night for Xen.
A lot more.
Yeah. Well, my experience with Xen has been, our company, we do a lot of various things from web hosting, very heavy database access, stuff like that, and we've been renting servers here at BTI, and we got up to the point where we were using entire racks of blade servers, and we've migrated about half of that onto just 2 really high power Dell Blade, latest cutting edge Dell Blade servers running Xen with everything, all the systems on there partitioned off onto the 2 systems as Xen slices. Since I get to go first on the virtualization stuff, I was going to cover basically what is virtualization, and virtualization is, at least from the hardware standpoint, when you take one computer box like this and chop it into pieces, each running their own operating system, and so depending on what kind of virtualization product you're using, you can run Windows, Linux, Macintosh OS,
I'm going to bug you here. Since we're recording, we're not sure if the audio's coming in, so I know it's annoying, but maybe if you could talk to the mic, hopefully.
If you want, I can actually stop it here and then see if the audio is coming through.
Should we do that real quick?
We're good on audio?
We're good on audio? Okay.
Basically, Wikipedia has an excellent article covering all the very basic types of virtualization here, and it started out being called process virtualization back in the 60s, and then it's been called virtual machines and hardware virtualization since then. And there's quite a number of different types. There's emulation, where you might want to just run a DOS box on your box or play your old Nintendo games on your PC. For that type of thing, you use emulators, like Xmain would be an example, and then there's Luch's, which is more emulating an x86 box that runs at about maybe 10% of the speed when it's cruising along. And virtual PC, I've never heard of. This is
Virtual
one of
PC
the
is a Mac thing, so you can run Windows
Mac.
before they went to Intel.
Microsoft bought them out.
Yeah.
The Chewy not sure how that's pronounced. That's actually probably going to be heavily covered when Robert's doing his KVM. It's a key piece for that. And native virtualization, that's VMware is probably the most familiar one here that we can use for that. And there's hardware-enabled virtualization, which is very new. Intel and AMD have added 2 extensions to their instruction set that allow you to basically present more underlying machinery in a safe fashion, protected fashion, to guest operating systems running on your PC. That's been picked up by Xen and KVM. I think it's required for KVM. Some of the VM workstation stuff, I thought there were more advanced stuff was using that now too. I thought their big product was using that. And then that's when partial virtualization isn't really used by much. And then there's para-virtualization. This is the big one that Xen came out with. I think they were the first to start calling like the hypervisor and stuff. And basically they're virtualizing the machine by taking the kernel on the primary machine. I'll get into this more in depth later. And also they add some basic API calls into the kernel to handle calls down to device drivers and stuff like that. And then your guest operating systems, they all have to have their kernel modified in some fashion to be able to call back into this hypervisor mechanism to actually make calls that go to hardware and stuff. And what other types of operating system? I'm not sure what that I'm not familiar with, but that's one of Solaris's fashions of doing it. There's containers. And application virtualization, that we're not covering at all. That's like the Java virtual machine sort of virtualization just for application programs to run inside of. And then there's cross-platform, which was almost, I'd put that with emulation, as best as I can tell, since you're trying to emulate a different CPU and everything. A complete different piece of hardware on your PC. So we covered Xen uses virtualization as well as hardware virtualization on systems that support it, which I guess that's the hardware virtualization. That's sort of one sentence. That's when the chipsets, Intel or AMD, have that new flag for the hardware extensions for virtualizations, which has been a huge improvement for I/O performance, like network handling and stuff. Your guest operating systems, they don't have to go down through the hypervisor, which then translates the call down into the device driver for the network card and then back all the way through there again. It gets direct access in a secured way through the actual chipset on the PC. Yeah, I think I covered that with the para-virtualization. Everything has to be modified. You have to patch your Linux distribution, the kernel, to just get Xen domain 0 up and running on there. And then you have to put patches onto your guest operating systems, which originally, up until the new hardware supported virtualization, you couldn't run Windows in Xen or anything like that. But with the hardware virtualization support now, you can actually run Windows or just about any x86 operating system. And here's the ones that are going to be getting covered here in the next month. I think we are on for that still, probably. But
as far as I know.
And that's only a small fraction of the number of, this is basically the list of all the virtualization programs and applications that you have available. For some of them are specialized for like IBM mainframes and stuff like that. A lot of them, probably the vast majority, are for x86 hardware. But there's just a huge number to select from these days. And put in here, just if you're interested, whether or not you can actually do like run Windows running Xen on your PC. If you have an AMD, you can cat out your CPU info and look in the flags, and AMD will have a SVM flag, and for Intel you'll have the VMX flag in there, which means you have support for the hardware virtualization. Okay, what is virtualization used for? There's a number of reasons. there's sandboxing, which is basically you're either writing like device drivers or writing software for a completely separate piece of hardware. Like if I wanted to develop on applications for my Nokia and run them and test them, I could actually create a sandbox virtual environment for running that on my PC without having to install it, uninstall it on the Nokia. And then there's access to multiple OSs on one system, which I actually use in our office a lot. We develop one of our products. It's a Win32 based graphical user program that we have to test. We support Windows 95, Windows 98, the whole line of them, and we just don't keep the hardware around for having an installation of every one of those. So we've gone and installed images using VMware to give us a nice clean system to install our software on every time. See what's involved with that. And that's probably our second biggest use of virtualization, and probably one of the nicest ones. Server consolidation, that's our other use for it. As I mentioned before, here at BTI, we just had way too many servers, and we had to, it's proving to be very time-saving to have systems where I can just create one base system in Xen, and all I have to do is go make a copy of that, give a new IP address and host name, and I just launch it right after that, and I've got another complete system set up. I can customize how much CPU it's going to need, how much disk, and how much memory, just writing the config file. So
Without having another hardware point of failure.
Huh?
Without having another hardware point of failure.
Right, but sort of the opposite of that is you have one giant hardware failure.
Yeah. Redundancy.
Yeah. I plan to publish this to the group here after I'm done here, so I've tried to put in a few links to things. Here's another section on Wikipedia that covers sort of examples of all the different things that you might want to do. Virtualization, another thing, like Xen supports saving an image while it's actually running, so I can make a complete backup of a system into a file while the machine's running, and then take that off-site, and if I need something, if I need to get that back, I can go to another hosting company, get a Xen server up and running, and just launch those up, and I'm off and running with all my systems again. Testing training.
Excuse me, how does it handle then, like, specific hardware, like RAID controller, device drivers? In the scenario you're talking about, you take an image on one system, you transplant it onto another server that's perhaps got different hardware, and I understand that the virtualization is supposed to take advantage of that, but on a server you're thinking, well, I got my Adaptec controller in there and I'm going to load that thing up, so does it completely virtualize?
Yeah, it's basically, it's coming right up. I'm probably going to go into that more here, but basically you have two different type of virtualized servers on a Xen system. You have domain 0, which is the very base level that loads up with all the hardware. Like in our case, we have Xen controllers and the bonded networking and all that stuff. And then you have your guest, your unprivileged domain systems, which all of those get virtualized through. And as far as they know, they just have this generic network interface, and they have generic disk access. They don't know anything about a fiber card or SAN or anything like that. And we've done a lot of live testing. We've had our first system there going over a year ago, and BTI will do maintenance once a month, and they do things like they can play with the fiber channel, so they'll pull one out so it has to fail over to one, and then plug it into a new fiber switch, and then pull the other one, plug it in. And the systems just keep running right along, even though that's their as far as they know, that's their primary hard drive. They don't know any different that anything happened. It's just that the base DOM0 system knows all about that stuff and abstracts it for the virtual client, virtual guest systems in there.
So your device driver essentially is at the Xen operating system level, but whatever you're loading on top of it really doesn't appreciate your specific hardware that it's working on. Is there any issues with getting hardware support for it?
I haven't had any yet, so I've only been running it on Dell servers though. But yeah, for everything else that I've had to deal with other hardware support, I've always used like VMware or things like that, which generally work pretty well unless you try to have a couple of different machines accessing the serial controller at the same time. So some of the pros for Xen are supported currently by the leading Linux providers that provide paid support, like Red Hat and SUSE. And they're really pushing, or like Red Hat with their latest version, they were really pushing Xen, but I can go into that more later in like a section. Virtualized systems run at near native speeds. Most of the CPU processing gets dropped straight down onto the processor from that virtualized server and runs at the normal speed that it would if it was on its own system. It's only got small little bits of extra CPU getting used by the top domain to actually manage that CPU across multiple machines and stuff like that. So you do like chop maybe 10% of the performance off the machine at the top. Supports CPU and memory partitioning. You can basically assign a machine 256, then you start getting warnings or notice it's going into swap space. You can tell it has 512 megs of RAM now, and all of a sudden it's got 512 megs of RAM and using it and not using swap anymore. And CPU, you can do the same thing. You can give it if it only had one CPU assigned to it, you can assign another one, or 4, or however many you want there. What Xen has done is they sort of have a virtualized CPU where you can actually, it's poorly documented, but you can basically have like 4 processors in a system, which is what we use. We actually use the single processor with 4 cores with hyper-threading, but it'll actually allow us to assign, you have 8 machines on there and you have the 4 cores. You assign 1 to each one, and then you peg the CPU on one. If one of the other machines needs CPU, it'll automatically cut that one machine down to half if it's the one sharing that CPU on there, and give the other machine half an equal share of time on there. So it's really difficult to actually interfere one virtual server to the other. You can't really detect that anything's going on with them. And we've had issues where we've run out of memory and stuff on the system and it's locked up, and nothing on the system, no other virtual servers had any idea that anything was going on with that. It's completely isolated. And I sort of mentioned this before, that I/O performance is near native with the new chipsets that support the hardware virtualization. And one issue that people might run into if you're trying to install this is with disk partitions. There's different ways to install it. You can install it as a file that's basically an image of the whole operating system, and the disk performance is maybe 1/4 to 1/10 of normal system disk access. But if you use partitioning on there, which I'm going to talk about later since it's relatively important for getting good performance, is basically the Linux volume management, where you can basically partition off sets of multiple disks, make one big giant disk out of it, and then partition that into new smaller chunks of very large numbers, and you can divvy it out really well. It doesn't have the drawbacks of trying to make real partitions on a disk, where a lot of hardware like IDE, I think you're limited to 8 total or something like that, a relatively small number. Covered this sort of the saving and running system, saving a running system for backups. We've used that both for backing system ups, taking a copy of a machine and making clones of it, and as well as doing sort of a off-time migration where we actually make the backup, move it over to a different machine, shut the one down, and bring it up on the other system. And they have something better for that, which is live migration, which is you basically issue a command, use their XM tool to migrate it. You issue a command that you want this system name moved to this server. And if you have everything perfectly set up and aligned, that system will jump right over to the other system and keep on running the whole time. When I've gotten it to work, it is completely unnoticeable. You can sit there with a ping running on the system and hitting refresh on your browser the whole time, and the web server is still up and serving pages, and it's completely unnoticeable. But that rarely, it's very buggy. I wouldn't use that in a production system. I haven't been able to get it consistent enough to even think about doing that with live systems.
Is that the same one where Wayne said he had watched, it was like Rainbow Six or some kind of game running?
Yeah, we
And
did,
then-
for our demonstration we did before, we were actually going to be taking what system, the Half-Life 2,
Okay.
whatever their Counter-Strike
Oh, yeah.
game was. We had the server running for that, and we were going to give a demo on that before we had our machine issues. But you could sit there playing the game, nothing, didn't even notice the jump across servers.
Okay.
So it takes a while for it to go. I'm not sure really how they keep it running all that time, but they've done an awfully good job for it when it does work. My biggest beef with it is the setup and configuration. These things, I'm always running into bugs with this. I do things the same way, it doesn't work. I install it on a machine, the machine won't even boot the kernel, even when I'm using actual image, pre-compiled images for that system. It seems like it should just work out of the box. It never does for anything but the one system I'm going to cover later. CentOS has actual pretty good support for it, and it's been working very reliably and consistently for me. Which I actually tried on my work PC, tried setting it up under Ubuntu, and it made it through the boot, but didn't make it into the actual X video part of it, so I started getting out there. I covered this briefly. You have two different virtualized servers here. You have the down zero, that's just that's the Linux system that gets booted up when you first boot up your system, and that one's always running. And it also has a daemon process in the background that manages. It's the Xen ND for daemon for basically managing all the virtual guests that it's hosting, and does the networking for them, the management, so you can actually monitor them and connect to the terminals and all of that stuff. Although for some reason they seem to keep running even when I've had that crash on me, and the systems were still running and responding on there. Down views, these are your unprivileged domains. You can have as many of these as resources will allow on there. We've got one system where we've had it fully partitioned off up to 20 on there, and everything was running along nicely. So this is how I install it. It's basically, once you have a basic CentOS system, you can just tell it to install everything. You're going to get some new entries in your grep configuration, and basically this is the new one. And normally this default will jump to number 1, and so you have to set this back to 0 to get it to boot to really tell it that you really want to boot that Xen image. But after that, you just reboot, select, or have it set from the default for the Xen image, and every time I've tried it with CentOS, it's worked perfectly. Everything else, I just have issues. I haven't tried with Red Hat or SUSE though.
Presumably if it works with CentOS, it would work with Fedora and Red Hat.
Yeah, they're taking all their stuff from Red Hat basically. So, and it works out well for us because we use BTI here and they support Red Hat, so having them come and do system maintenance and stuff on our machines for us
Colin,
has.
can I have you stop? I gotta
Okay.
plug this thing in. Okay.
Okay. I was like, let's see that. During BTI being able to do support for us now with switching over to that, which has been a big help. We used to be a two-man team for system administrators in our company, which was me and Wayne, who was a member here a while back, and he's gone. So now I'm the full-time system administrator for everything, as well as the lead system or software developer there, which has sort of made me look for ways to try and push time off to other people lately, which are all our original systems. We were running Gen 2 here, and the BTI guys would come in and not really know where things were, how to check what was wrong, so we'd have to always get a call in the middle of the night if something went wrong. But hopefully now, the way things are, BTI's been going in there and doing updates to like their the fiber channel cards and stuff like that on scheduled maintenance, and they pretty much go in there, do the whole thing. I just sort of monitor to check that everything's working afterwards, and that's been saving me a lot of time now too by switching over to CentOS. LVM stands for Linux Volume Manager. This is basically a disk partitioning tool that does more of it's a software partitioning, and it allows you to do a number of neat little things. I think this link might have a little picture. Yeah, basically you have a physical hard drive, and the old way of making partitions is you do it on the disk with fdisk or your whatever distribution you're installing with, whatever, and you get these devices like SCSI B1, 2, and what volume LVM does for you is basically you can define this as a volume, or you actually start out with PV create and start adding the partitions that you want into the system and giving them a name. And then after you've done that, you create this big group with VG create that's a sum total of all the disks. So if you have like a video server and you want a lot of space on there and you want it to be really fast and high-speed access to it, you can take two separate disks, put two big partitions on them, group them together with the volume group, and then you all of a sudden have this one big giant partition that's the data for reading and writing is going to be split off across the multiple disks on there. So it's sort of a poor man's RAID too. And once you've created your volume group, you tear little chunks out of it with the LV create, which gives you your new usable partitions here. And basically, one of the big reasons for using this for me is because we use the SAM with BTI, which we are starting to run out of space, so we have them grow it. And what that means is all of a sudden our machine shows that it has access to another device that's 50 gigs in size. So I can just add it to my volume group, and then I've got 50 more gigs in my volume group that I can start taking chunks out of to assign to other virtual machines. And when machines are retired and you need that space back, you can just free up that space, and that whole piece will disappear, and you go back to having that whole set of partition again. And as I mentioned before, this is the other most important reason for this is it's probably 4 to 10 times faster than trying to run my virtual machines out of file-based system images, which, since a lot of our systems are databases and stuff like that, that's just not even acceptable at all to have a slowdown of any percentage around. I included the basic bands of what you would do here. Here I cut and pasted what I was doing from adding another section on from the SAN, which gives me these kind of strange device numbers, but normally this would be like SB1 or SA1 on a normal like serial ATA or SCSI drive there. And basically I add my new physical 50 gigs that BTI gave me. I give it a name with VG Create, and then up there I create a logical volume. You're creating a 20 gig one called Xen disk out of SAN VG, which I into VG Create. And right there you can do either nothing if you want to use that whole 20 gigs and let the Linux system you're installing go in partition if you're actually going through a install mechanism, or you can just throw a file system onto it right there. And after you do that, if you're doing that, you probably have either an image that you're going to be putting on there or a backup of some other image, which then you basically take your image, mount it so it's in a real directory so you can actually CD into it and everything. And then you can do a copy of that over to your new mounted volume that you just created. And from there you move on to sort of skip down into the config. From there you'd have this physical disk that looks like, even though my systems have the fiber channel SAN that their devices that they're using, as far as they know, I just tell them it's a SCSI drive and SCSI drive A partition, and tell them what the real name of my system is of that partition. And then they go boot up, and I think they have a ext3 formatted SCSI drive, which, playing with these settings in there, I'm not too familiar with. These, normally when you have to jump back into the section here, if you're installing something like virtual appliances, which are pre-created images for you, there's sites popping up all over the place right now that are providing these specialized images where, like Jumpbox, they provide you with completely pre-configured systems. Like if you want a track system that's all completely set up, did everything for you, all the software you need installed on there, you don't have to do any tweaking or twiddling, then you can just download that image from there and then launch it in your virtualization system, and you have a guest system out there that's running track for you. And usually with most of these, if there's other configuration that needs to be done, usually a lot of them will have like a little interface where it says like get started or something like that opens up a web browser and then has a series of pages that you go through and are actually setting configuration settings for the system to make it look like yours and behave the way you want it to. And I've been using these a lot. I haven't used them with Xen at all, but we've been looking at a lot of things in our office where we're looking for like collaboration software, things like that, and there's just dozens and dozens of them. And every time I set one up, it takes me at least a couple hours usually to get the database installed for it, or permissions and everything set up there, and then go through the setup on the system for it. And with these, I can just pop it up, let some of the people that are going to be using it start playing around with it, see what they think, and then move on to the next one. And virtually no time at all. Most of these for Xen are going to come with both a dot image file or multiple ones if they include like a swap drive form and stuff like that, that you'll pull out of a tarball into their own little directory and then set up the configuration for them. They usually come with their own config file with them, and all you really have to do is they'll have settings in here for where the disk is, and you'll basically change the directories there to where you actually extracted the image files to, and then you can boot it right up from there. Let's see, and this is where on boot up you can actually set some of the things. You can configure these live. Like here we have a 1 gig machine with gets access to one of the virtual CPUs, and we give it a name and set it up to the bridge network. That's pretty much the only networking I do with it. Is the same one that lets you launch as many systems as you want on there. We don't do anything special like trying to firewall or have special port forwarding rules or anything like that for it. We give each one its own IP address and just set it up on the bridge, and everything gets taken care of by Xen relatively easily there. The other routes are actually quite a bit more complicated. I think I have This is at Xen source. They've got a really nice document covering all the different networking setups and how everything's working. One thing you're going to notice is when you get on there or start getting systems set up on there, like I have 10 virtual machines on one, so if I do a ifconfig or an IP address listing, I end up with the multiple Ethernet cards on there, the bonding interface. I have 10 virtual Ethernets, and then the 10 of these. It just gets ridiculous to some extent. But Xen images, if you use the just basic bridging piece on there, that Xen takes care of all of that for you. It gives it auto-assigns it a new MAC address that it just sort of makes up if you don't give it a specific one in the config file. And pretty much get to boot up and have networking going right off the bat just with that one simple networking configuration there. And I've tried messing with some of their other networking, but when you start getting into those interfaces, the sheer number of them and trying to set up the routing, there's a lot of manual configuration. It's becomes very time consuming. Overwhelming, very error-prone process there.
Now, you said your servers are using the hardware as well as they have the hardware links in there?
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah, basically for that you don't need to do anything special for that. You have to have the right version of CentOS. Just a new enough version. I think the hardware support came with Xen version 3 when they first started supporting it. But there's nothing special to do for that anymore. You need to use those. And this is another reason why I'm using CentOS is they have this program. I'm not sure if this is specific to CentOS or Red Hat, or it might be a Xen provided tool. I haven't really looked into it much, but basically I type that and see what the name of my machine is, how much memory I want, give it the new partition slice that I've assigned to it, and you don't want to do that because you need to run it in a command prompt. You want the console install, and you point it to a location where it can find the CentOS installation, and it goes out and grabs it, and as soon as you hit there, you wait a couple of seconds, all of a sudden you get this screen popping up like Linux booting, and then go through the install steps of a normal, a command line installation of XenOS, and you're all set and ready to go. And we've used to use Gen 2, but that was, we started out, we finally got it, me and Wayne both worked together on that for close to a week before we finally got a Gen 2 image working properly and all set up to where we wanted. And then we were just uploading that base image to new systems that became out of date, and then trying to update our base install image. Things went wrong in it, and I just wasn't going to go through the time to try and recreate a new, more updated version of it. It was just, I can't even recreate how it would take me at least a week, I'm sure, to figure out how to get Gen 2 to install going if it's anywhere close to the same as it was. But for the most part, I haven't had any reason to switch away from XenOS, so I don't even know too well what the installation procedures are for anything else besides that. I've tried getting it to run under my Ubuntu box, but that hasn't worked. And basically all I have for systems for testing on a production system, so I can't really do testing. I have to go with just what's working now. The primary tool here for interfacing with Xen is use this when you're in the, from command line when you're in the down zero system. And basically type Xen, you get your list of commands that you can do. It has a whole bunch. Most half of them are kind of, I never even use, but you have the console, like the system locks up because it's used up all its memory and I need to get onto there. And I can't get a SSH prompt to it because it can't assign memory to start up that SSH console and bash and everything. So I can jump directly into the console here by basically saying, like, if this one was all locked up and I wanted to jump into it, I do XM and then console and then a 1 for the ID of that machine. And mouse gestures. Basically, all of a sudden, I have a pop-up of all the output that was going to that console previously and everything. So I can watch systems while they're booting, do reboots on them, and I get all the console for the shutdown and restart them. And that you can actually do when you do create, when you do an XM create, you give it a config file name that you set up, and then it goes and starts up that process, and you can do a -C, I believe, to have it automatically dump you into the console as it's booting up that machine, which is another handy option. Help list that lists all your systems running. Here we've got on this system a whole bunch. We started out naming our, since the virtual guests are sort of like parasitic, we started naming out our systems like parasites that we can learn on Helpware. Then we've got people like moving customers onto a machine named that. We don't want them getting bounced mail or anything from that, so we started going with their systems. But our two databases are still, they have the original names on that one. Memset, it lets you alter the amount of memory. Like you have a system that you assigned way too much memory for, it's not using even half of it, you can drive it down to only be using half that memory, or vice versa. It's going to swap, you need more, you give it more memory while it's running. Then here's the buggy migrate feature, which basically you'll type migrate, or XM, then migrate, and then an ID here, the system name, and then you'll provide the server name of another Xen server that you wanted to migrate over to. And many of the times when things are set up, that system will jump right over to the other system without any pause. can pause, you can stop the machine when you don't need to run them, haven't really found a use for pausing something. But
Is there a way
basically,
of restarting it after that?
well, it's not the same as shutting it down. It's just it's running along, and then it just sort of stops right there, doing whatever it's doing, and then you unpause it, and it comes back. And it's running right where it was before. That might be more just a feature that it uses for when you're doing like these save, where it's actually saving a complete image of that system. It has to pause the machine basically while it does the snapshot of that image. So reboot, that doesn't work. That crashes, locks up the system and crashes it. I've never had it actually reboot a system. The only way to reboot the system is reliably is to log into that machine through the console or through secure shell and issue a reboot to it. Restore, that's how you bring them, well, I guess save. Save dumps your system that's running down into a file for you that you can use to create backup or things like that, and then you use restore to bring it back up to life again. And that's that's almost like pause the machine when it comes back up. It's going to be still running right where it was before. So that can have some strange consequences, like database connections, and they're there tomorrow to bring it back up, and you have to go in and reboot it. So there's a lot of bugs that occur trying to do it that way instead of actually just shutting it down and making a copy of the actual system image while it's shut down, and then actually being able to boot that up later if you ever need to recover from that system you lost. Shut down, that doesn't work either. Probably does the same thing that reboot starts doing, and that some of the systems, they start going through their reboot procedures, but then they just get turned off, and it seems to sort of hit the power button on them before anything can ever finish.
So you have to go exit the console and go to shut down inside.
Yeah. Then you have destroy. Sometimes you can't get into a system at all, or you tried shutting it down or something and it got locked up, or you forgot the kernel locks up and you didn't have in here on the crash restart. So basically it's the kernel's hung and you can't do anything, and you have to issue a destroy on it to get it really shut down. Then you can do another create on it to bring it back up. And uptime, if you don't want to log into the machines to see how long they've been running, you can run that against their system name or ID and see how long that machine has been up and running. And a vCPU set is used for assigning or removing extra CPUs from a system, which I've never actually tried to remove the last CPU from a system, which seems kind of interesting. That's what it does. But that I've actually tested, it's worked. That and the memory set both seem to be reliable and consistent, as long as you don't try to take more memory away than the system's actually using, type of thing.
You said earlier, I think you talked about backing off. If you had one system that was using up a lot of CPU, you could back off how much CPU it had available. Can you do that in like fractions of a CPU, or is it basically if you assign a CPU?
Just integer numbers, basically.
So if you have one system that basically pegs a CPU, it's going to peg a CPU at least one, according to
well,
this.
If nothing else is using that CPU. But it's a weighted system. So like on my system, I have 4 cores, so there's basically 4 processors to share. If I give, if I have 8 machines on there and one's pegged, and each one has one of those CPUs, it's going to use all of it unless that other one that's sharing that needs CPU, and then it'll go up to sort of a 50-50 split if need be. but it's also weighted in that if I have systems and I assign them 10 CPUs each, then one system has one CPU. If that system gets pegged, the other one will still be able to go up to like 90% CPU, and that one will get pushed down to just getting its little 10% because it only has one of 10.
So you're saying that you're creating virtual CPUs?
Yeah.
So you have 4, but you say there's 10. Is that
Well, it's more a matter of how many virtual CPUs you have assigned total to running systems on there.
I'm just kind of curious because we were running in an environment like that, and we had Oracle on a couple of the virtual machines, and like if Oracle went nuts, I mean, it just like pretty much killed the whole system.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, there was no sharing of CPU. Whatever CPUs that virtual machine had, it was toast.
Yeah.
It took everybody else down with it.
Okay.
So, and I'm just sort of, you know, I haven't seen it really work. Mind you, that was a different virtual, you know, that was an IBM ZBM system.
You think they'd have that right?
Well, you'd think it would, but that's kind of why I was asking how reliable that was.
Yeah, I've only obviously run this on multi-core systems, but on those, every system keeps responding perfectly during it. The databases are keeping up just perfectly, and multiple machines have hit issues with that because of certain networking issues that we had with the BTI's firewall guys. But we had multiple machines going to just running the CPU up to 100% that they could, but all the other systems were running along just fine on that same box without any issues at all. So I'm actually very happy with how well that works. XM has a top command where you can watch all your systems just like in a regular top system where you watch all your processes, and you have all your processes running. It gives you a list of how much of the CPU is getting utilized by each one, number of seconds, how much memory it's actually using, which this shows up in the XM list, which is easier to keep track of since it doesn't jump around. But mostly this is nice to see just as a system running away, because it'll jump up to the top at high CPU utilization and Surefire. And down at the bottom of this command, there's normally on the window a list of options that you have, like you want to sort or filter and things like that, so that you can monitor all the systems at once to see if, primarily I only use it to watch for CPU if one's trying to run away or something like that. Since none of the machines can actually go, like with memory, they can't go ask for more memory from Xen on their own. You have to be able to...
Can you kill from the XM command?
Yeah, if you have one that's run away and you can't get into it in console or secure shell or anything into it, you have the destroy command, which really kills it right now. It's pulling the plug, basically. Some other tools I don't use. I am perfectly happy with using XM. It does all the things that I needed to. But Google's come out with products for virtual machine management. I think they are, I'm not sure if they just support Xen. I saw something about them talking about KVM, but they have stuff in here to help you manage your LVM volumes and for all your disks, and as well as managing all of your virtual machines and everything. I haven't actually gotten this one running or working, but it looks like something that I'd actually want to investigate.
If you're running a graphical desktop on your DOM 0 and you load, you do a yum install LVM system config,
Is that right?
you get a real nice LVM graphical thing. I load it on every, it doesn't load by default, which I kind of find annoying.
Yeah.
But, and it's like about a half a meg little tool for your graphical desktop, and it saves you a lot of time trying to remember how to do all the LVM and all the PV commands. I mean, there's a lot of options there, especially if you're resizing volumes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's hard to remember all the options on those things, and the graphical version of it is really, really good.
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend that.
Is it a pretty simple, like GTK type
It's
app?
really, no, I think it's, like, you need to be running an X desktop. You need to be running a GNOME or a KDE or something like that.
I'm just wondering if I could use it with here, because I have to do remote X, basically, over the network, which a lot of things don't work very well for remote X applications
Oh,
between our office.
I've never
and
had,
BCI.
well, I guess, you know, you're saying your BNC isn't, your remote BNC isn't working, doesn't work very well, or just on some things?
Well, we don't install desktop at all on the systems.
Okay.
So the only way to run, that we have it set up now is we run just remote desktops or remote X applications directly through
Oh, I
SSH.
see. You know, I've never tried it.
No.
You'd have to try it, but
Yeah.
like I say, it's if you just search for LVM with Yum or and see LVM-system-config, and I mean, it's just the base tool that Red Hat has for their graphical desktop, and
Somebody
maybe
actually have that
maybe
on.
it would be a handy tool.
Yeah.
I mean, I use it a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I've had a lot more problems managing LVM. Like these things, on the first system we set everything up as separate partitions. So there's a swap partition, primary disk partition, depending on what it was. If it was a database, it has a database partition. So if you do a LV display on there, it's just pages of information go flying by on all of the partitions on it.
Yeah, the only time I've ever had an issue where I haven't been able to use it is I had an array and I had some drives out of another system, and you know when you install Linux, they kind of name things the same way. So I had two logical volumes that were the same name. I pulled out some RAID drives out of one RAID system and I hot plugged them into the other, and they all had the same names. And so I was trying to rename the logical volumes and the partitions, and I couldn't get I mean, that was beyond the capability of the graphical tool. You have to get down into an ID that's like a 30-character string and mess with that. And after much Googling and 4 hours of, you know, wearing my forehead away on the wall, I finally figured out how to do it. But otherwise, I've been able to do everything, resizing volumes and growing and shrinking them, whatever.
I'll have to give that a try. There's some X applications that they're lightweight, no fancy graphics. They run just fine across a ton of.
Well, if size is any indication, you know, it's a real small download. So
Yeah, I mentioned
it
that.
might work.
It's not going to be coming with a lot of graphics and stuff too, or special light effects and stuff like that. Xen Man is another one. It's that one I've actually had problems using. I've actually used it to try and start up systems. They won't boot up, or they'll boot up into a crashed state, which I'm not sure. It seems like that just runs on top of XM, but it's doing something else in there that I just can't get that to work properly for me. And Red Hat's got a nice one that they're developing now. It's actually supports Xen as well as KVM now, so you can handle multiple virtual machines in there. Yeah, let's do it too. But that looks like another interesting one that I hope to try out here if I potentially could run across remote X sessions. One of the things with Xman is that I know you can actually connect, you can run it locally on your PC and have it connect to the remote Xen server and issue commands there. So you can have a list of virtual Xen primary real servers in there and go into each one and manage it. But it doesn't work for me since it's buggy. So Well, Xen for us, as I said, we've been using it in production for our systems we started our first one, 1 year, it'll be 1 year a week from now, basically. And we're up to 2 of them now. We just got another one in December, right in the middle of December. We host them here at BTI. They're blades, or Dell's 1955 blade servers. Each one right now, BTI can give us up to 32 on those gig, but we have them set to 8 right now. That seems to be about the right amount for the type of systems we're creating. We're doing a lot of hosting, just basic web applications for people who work in the same transportation industry that we do. We get a lot of consulting to develop sites for them and everything, so we really don't need beefy machines for many of these. It's 256 megs assigned to each one, with 5 gigs of disk space is overkill for a lot of them, especially since all the database applications that they run, we partition off a rather beefier section just for that database activity for them. So all they're really doing is running some basic PHP or Python code that we did consulting job to work on for them. And, they have 130 gig RAID disks right now, which we don't really, we tried partitioning off some of that on the first one, and because of the inconsistent speeds between the actual on-system disks and the SAN disks, it just wasn't working out very well with us. I think there might be issues there. We tried at one point trying to add our SAN drives with the volume management into the same group, and it might have been partitioning off, so this one server had like a couple blocks really fast disk and then all of a sudden a slow block, things like that. So we were getting, like on database tests we were running, we were getting random inconsistent results and stuff like that. So we just are basically calling that empty space that we don't use on the systems. And these systems have dual gigabit Ethernet and dual fiber channels that have been live tested quite a few times now for failover. Right now, as I mentioned before, all these systems are relatively small, so they're generally like 5 gig at that point. So then they put 10 systems on there. And one of them, our database server, obviously needs a bit more. But this, we started out with 50. I actually went through the Linux volume management, set up the new 50 gigs that BTI gave us, added it into my volume group, and took a chunk out, and was able to just keep using it like it suddenly was a bigger drive, and start adding new virtual machines onto the system without ever having to bring it down or anything like that. So that seems like it's going to work out for us if we grow in disk space needs. Basically, all our new stuff is CentOS 5. The old stuff we have a few old Gen 2 systems running under down-use as guest operating systems on there, but we're slowly migrating out of those. Right now we have about 17 of them running, and soon to be at least 3 more in there. We're still, I believe we have 5 or 6 more of BTI's older Dell 1855 blade servers that we're still migrating into these systems, but not sure how many we had to begin with. I think it was probably close to somewhere in the range of 15 to 20 at some point in time there. But looks like we'll be able to compact all of those down onto just 3 of these systems and have plenty of system resources to spare for if live migration starts working, we'll be able to move all the guest operating systems off of one onto the other 2 and be able to take that machine down for maintenance which is our ultimate goal there, is to be able to move things around like that and do maintenance and upgrade machines without it ever having any kind of downtime. Several times like on our first system we set up, Xen has had some issues where things just sort of disappeared, like the manager wouldn't let me see any of my machines or interact with them at all anymore, which requires a complete reboot of the system, which involves rebooting all, like on that, it's the 10 guest operating systems as well as the main system, and that's generally time-consuming, painful effort since you have to bring up the database servers first and then bring our web application servers up. Each one you have to go in, test all these websites, you have to log into them and make sure all their features are working. So I can spend at least 2-3 hours doing just a reboot on one of the down zeros. So that's one of the negative time savers switching over to this. I wanted to cover here a little bit about where things are headed with Xen virtualization, mostly about where things are going with Xen. Probably a few years ago, Red Hat was talking about how they're behind Xen on the way, put out a bunch of articles. They were partnered with them, had developers working on the Xen source code. And then about a year ago, Xen told them that they couldn't call their product Xen. When they said Red Hat Enterprise Linux is coming out with Xen virtualization, they have to switch it to based on Xen, basically. And there were sort of a lot of people griping about that from Red Hat. A lot of like the developers there who'd actually been working on the Xen software. And right around that exact same time, Red Hat, or a new product sort of came onto the scene called KVM, which suddenly all those developers that were working on Xen were now contributing to KVM source code. And so basically Red Hat is funding basically KVM instead of Xen, although even like a lot of the recent patches and stuff that some of these developers are doing, you see like they perform the exact same patch to both Xen as well as KVM at the same time. Another thing that's happened to Xen here recently, which makes me less likely to stick with them, is they're acquired by Citrix. There's not even mention of other systems that support Xen like Red Hat or anything on Citrix remake of the website now. What's this?
It's Xen.com.
Or Xensource.com, yeah.
They call it Xen.com, it's not Citrix, it's
But now basically the product is the Citrix Xen server, which kind of makes me not want to use them anymore. Which is why I'm really looking forward to Robert's presentation on KVM here. I'm kind of expecting Red Hat to start talking about KVM coming out in the next enterprise Linux distribution. They've already brought it out for the Fedora core system, as well as SUSE has integrated KVM into their OpenSUSE product already. And one of the main developers working on virtualization at Red Hat sort of went off on a talk about some of the things he's going to be talking about at the upcoming Red Hat Summit. And he's mentioning KVM almost everywhere, and he starts talking about prophecy and just the direction the virtualization is going to go. So I'm kind of expecting KVM to be the new chosen virtualization under Red Hat coming out pretty soon when we start talking about the next enterprise version. Just the fact that he has to talk about there being a direction change at all. So, yeah. And a year ago, KVM wasn't even really an option. They had a lot of problems with it. It had just come out. But it's already starting to look pretty usable. I'm expecting to switch over to it from Xen probably within a year from now, the way things have moved along with KVM. Okay, that's all I really had to talk about it. Are there any questions or things for better detail?
I think that was awesome. Thanks. Actually, I did have a question, but the way you kind of like shot Xen down, so I too am kind of looking forward to KVM.
Yeah.
But talking about like graphical user interfaces, like loading windows on there.
Mm-hmm.
How good is it as far as like utilizing the 3D part of a video card? So like if I want to load a 3D game,
Yeah, it
in
goes
Windows.
through, I've read about that a while back. There's a piece that's supported by a number of virtualization products. It's listed. Up here, I haven't actually tried this at all. Yeah, the VGML. Which is basically OpenGL system that's been written for handling the driver translation virtual machines. And it's used by quite a number of the virtual machines like VMware, Xen, I think KVM.
So, and for graphics, straight raw graphics power, probably pretty good, but I've heard that like if you've got multimedia cards, you know, things that you can get, you can bring FM and cable through on, and you know, tie in your DVD player and stuff like that. That you're pretty much you can't get those to work. That's what someone had told me.
Oh.
You get into that specialized kind of stuff. Like I've got
Yeah.
you know, a high-end ATI card home for my multimedia system, and
Oh,
you know,
right.
you know, you can't lay anything on top of that. You can still use it, but you can't have a virtual thing being able to go and watch your cable TV, you know, on your PC through it or anything like that.
I expect for that to be something more like, if anything supports it, it's going to be VMware probably.
Yeah.
Which I know they've got pretty good support. I use VM Player at home for running Windows 98, so I can run a little PIC microcontroller in through there with only Windows hardware, which it doesn't do that completely well.
Well, you've got to get an open layer like this, an open virtualization layer to translate to as a starting point, and some of that hardware has got some pretty specialized device drivers built just for their software. You know, so but that's a big improvement right there. And like a lot of games and any kind of CAD tools probably would work real well with that.
Now with like the LVM, when you go ahead and just make a virtual image and you're done, and then you want to clone that and start using it, do you just use LVM to increase the partition size that's already been given? So like if
I'm not sure if I've even tried that yet. I know it's in there. Have you tried that at all?
Resizing?
Yeah.
Not, I mean, I'm not running any kind of virtual environment like this, but as far as just like under Linux, resizing a volume, no problem. I've even shrunk them. I mean, amazingly. I had a case where I was out a digit when I was creating my partitions, and then I'm like, I didn't want to reload everything, so I resized it. Now the only bad thing about that is it took like 5 hours. It just ground for 5 hours doing whatever and reallocating all the inodes and then the whole file tree and everything. But it worked, which I just was blown away that it actually worked.
Okay.
So yeah, I think probably increasing size is probably a lot faster than decreasing size for obvious reasons.
It's free space.
But yeah, no problem. And adding disks and dropping disks and all that stuff, I found it to be really, really robust.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with it. When I first came across it, say about 3 years ago, it was kind of new and I didn't really know what to think of it. But now I'm totally with the program.
It was actually new. 3 years
To me,
ago?
it was new.
Oh, okay.
To me, it was new. It's probably been around longer than that, but to me, that was the first time I had installed a version of Linux that pretty much wouldn't let you install it unless you used the LVM.
Okay.
No more of this, /dev SDA. Nah, wasn't going to go for that at all.
Really?
Yeah, has to be, vol group 00, or it's not happy.
And how is that applied to the actual Linux install? Because you got to have a partition for your swap space and
Everything goes on the LVM except your boot.
Yeah, on my CentOS systems, all my virtualized guests actually install LVM on top of their little LVM slice. And so I can basically chop out one piece that's going to be completely raw partition, unformatted and everything. That install goes through and puts a swap partition on the boot, slash directory and everything. And
but that's
does it on under
virtual.
LVM, so it's running virtual.
Virtual on virtual.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically. And what's really good is, especially for swap, if you realize that the default swap wasn't quite what you needed, now you can actually increase your swap space. Whereas you couldn't do that before. You know what I'm saying? You were pretty much hosed if what you'd have to do is turn your swap off, allocate a completely different area of disk for swap, and then point your swap to that. You couldn't grow your existing swap. When swap is on a logical volume, you can just grow it and be done.
Well, for swap, you could create multiple swap.
You could create multiple swaps. That's right.
Actually, if they're on different disks, it would jump between the two.
Right.
So if I took my base system and just repartitioned it, I wouldn't use that disk, I'd actually use LVM.
Right.
And then it would, I can do all that and
Or
then
you'd you'd use fdisk to create one big giant partition on there, but after that gets added in. It's your LVM, it's all LVM from there.
You kind of get two partitions on the Fedora installs. Is you get your boot is like a little partition, and then everything else is all one partition, and then your LVM sits on that. And that assumes you're just talking one drive. If you got multiple drives or whatever, then then they kind of get all rolled in. So you have drive A, B, C, and then you have your logical volume sitting across the whole span of all of those.
Okay. How's that dangerous when a drive dies or a partition dies?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
But usually when you're doing that, like in a server class environment, they're going to be mirrored. I mean, you're always running that on top of RAID as well.
Yeah, I've hardware RAID on my machines actually, I guess that's not even, I'm not using those partitions anymore. But I go off the SAM, which is RAID automatically, and I don't really have to know anything about that.
Okay.
But let's say you ran out of disk, well, you just go and plug another disk into your system, go into your logical volume manager, add it, and then you can take any file system that you've got and you can just grow it, just like that. So I mean, it's pretty good. I didn't trust it to start with, but I'm a believer in it now. It makes life way easier, and it's solid. I've never had a single problem with it now.
Okay.
Not one.
Have you used different file systems on it? EXT3, swap, you mentioned.
I've used raw. I've set up some raw file systems for a SAM environment, which is basically no file system.
Yeah.
Kind of. And then swap, and EXT3. Oh, I had NTFS on one.
That's a tough one to shrink and grow.
I haven't tried to shrink and grow that,
No.
but I understand it does work from what I've read online. So,
So once Xen's kind of a bugger to get going, but once it goes, it usually works.
Yeah, it's kept, our first system, it still has issues, but
Okay.
the second one, we installed all the latest Xen stuff on there as of December, and that one has not had a single little hiccup ever. It's just kept on running. But I've added, that machine's probably had 30 systems on it that I've added, taken down, the new ones on there, mixed up or returned disk space through LVM back to the disk, taken it back out. And that's also the one that I actually extended the size of our SAN disk on there and added it into the LVM partition. So,
Oh, I know another one I was going to ask is I played with like VMware and VirtualBox, and when you install like a Windows product, like Windows XP, you can do something called like a seamless, I guess that's what it is, it's just Windows seamless or something. So basically, once you get your Ubuntu up, and then you run like VMware, and then you run Windows, seamless desktop, that's what it is.
oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you can say go seamless, and then your start bar is actually physically in your Ubuntu desktop. And then you just click start your application, and your applications are just running within your Ubuntu desktop. But they're virtualized. I don't know if you...
I haven't seen that part yet.
Oh, okay.
I always just set it up to be just one of my screens that I jump to full screened in there.
Okay.
And one of my desktops that just hotkey in back out to mine and stuff.
Okay.
That's the way I always used it.
so you can't like line up all the little consoles on the screen and see them all running at the same time or anything like that, yeah?
What do you mean?
Like, I mean, if you had, say, a dozen virtual environments, see that all the consoles at the same time, just a little mini version of them.
Oh.
Alt-tab.
No, that's, you have to pretty much bring up X terminals for each little one of them.
Oh, okay.
Like when I'm doing reboots and stuff, I usually just use one big X term with a tab for each machine in there. But even that way, it's a lot of typing. Just typing
And
reboot.
And can one of them be like a Windows?
On this hardware, it should be able to do that.
You just haven't done it.
No, we've got no Windows software that we run at all, so except for the front office, which is always problematic.
Haven't switched this in. Well, I learned a lot. It's really cool. I guess, what's the next meeting? Next meeting is going to be
Let's see who's,
and Robert and John?
I don't know. We'll
Okay.
see how many people are available, how many of them are available. I know Robert's had stuff going on like last 3 months, so.
Well, I brought, oh, I'm sorry. I'm just going to say I brought some books. O'Reilly's still sending us some books here. You guys can take a look at them. And
Those ones you just got?
no, I think 2 of them I was actually looking at. We got them a couple months ago and got the either